When you're writing a paragraph for a literary analysis, there needs to be a clear topic sentence that sets up the main idea for the entire paragraph. And that topic sentence should relate clearly back to your thesis statement. This should be in your introduction. The word topic can throw people off a little bit. Technically, the sentence does provide the topic for the paragraph, but it should also go a step further and provide the claim for the paragraph. I also want to show you how you can add more depth, more close reading, more analysis into your paragraphs, and how to make sure that there's one consistent idea that flows all the way through. So I want to show you a draft that makes a good effort toward doing these things, but that needs revised. And so you might want to pause and read that first paragraph. Now this is about a story called Woman Hollering Creek, about a young girl, a teenager I suppose, who falls in love and marries this guy who she thinks is just her knight in shining armor, who whisks her away from a small town in Mexico to live in a border town in Texas. It turns out the husband is abusive, and so the story traces her coming of age under these circumstances. So just for a little bit of background. Now, if you look at this paragraph, the student has done a good job of attempting a topic sentence. And this is about how Cleophilus, the main character, her life didn't turn out how she wanted it to. It's a little general. It's pretty clear in the story that this is not what she'd imagined for herself. But it works. It tries. It talks about how she watches these telenovelas and how she wants her life to be like that, and that now there's no happy ending. There's a lot of summary here, though, right? That first sentence is kind of like that. The fact she watches the telenovelas is clear in the story. That now she's trapped in an abusive relationship is summary. That she feels like she's stuck, that she's not going to have a happy ending, that she's, and then at the end you get this sort of, this shows she feels stuck and unhappy, which is common in abusive situations. Kind of general commentary about life, not really a specific analysis of the story. But what this person tries to do well is include signal phrases, right? Cisneros writes, Cleophilus says, before most quotes. You'll notice that they don't do it here or here, but she does do it here. So, again, try to be consistent with these. Make sure every quote is blended into your own writing. You can see an attempt to provide analysis, right? This quote shows that she thought her life would be like a telenovela. Okay, but if you look at the quote, it kind of just says that. So don't use your follow-up sentences just to restate what the quote says. There's a reason you included it, and the reason should be it shows us something about your topic sentence. It proves your claims, your arguments, your interpretation in some way. It informs your interpretation. Don't assume your readers just know what the connection is. Tell us, show us, provide some analysis. It's those things that connect stuff. Sometimes when we have an idea in our mind, it's so clear to us that we can't imagine anybody would need an explanation. But in reality, we do need explanations. We're not in your head. So make sure that you provide those connections on the paper. Some people worry about overreading. Go for it. Try to overread. Worst case scenario, you're off track. You can back it back a little bit. But that's better than having too much summary or too many quotes with no real follow-up. Okay? So you can see, again, that this student is attempting to close the paragraph in a way that shows some kind of cohesion, right? So she starts off, didn't turn out how she wanted it to. It ends, she's sad, it's not what she imagined. So there's some cohesiveness. On the other hand, it doesn't really have a lot of depth. So I want to show you a revision of this paragraph, right? That takes the same concept that she wishes her life had been like these telenovelas, that when she's young, she imagines life is going to be glamorous and passionate and it's all going to be about love. And that as she ages and these particular experiences that are very difficult, that she struggles with how to take that younger version of life and connect it to the current one. Right, so let's take a look at the revised paragraph. Again, you can take some time. I'll throw this document on Blackboard too so that you can take a closer look at what I'm looking for. So in this revised paragraph, you'll notice even just visually, it's longer. That probably, if it's done well, means that it's more in depth. And more in depth is typically good as long as you're not going off base, adding just personal commentary. adding in more summary. You don't want that. Instead, let's take a look at what this writer has included. We have a new topic sentence. As Cleophilas' life changes, her memories of telenovelas change and reflect her experiences. Well, this is more specific. It's not just she was hoping they would be like telenovelas, but instead shows that her view of telenovelas when she was young and now has shifted, right? She still thinks maybe it's like a telenovela, but maybe she realizes that those telenovelas were a little more complex than she thought when she was 15 or 16 years old, right? So she's older. She's seeing things through a more mature, more experienced lens, and unfortunately through a traumatic lens as well, okay? So as her life changes, her memories change and reflect her experiences. The next sentence is a little bit more specific too. The young Cleophilas uses her love of telenovelas to help her plan her life. This is setting us up to support this idea that her life changes, right? So to support that in a paragraph, I need to show how that changes. I need a before and an after. So part of the paragraph should describe her before view, and part of it should reflect her after view. So this new sentence helps us get there, right? The young Cleophilas uses her love to help plan her life. So again, it shows that she watched dramatic, emotional telenovelas. I think the original said overly emotional. That's evaluative. Overly compared, based on what they are emotional. That genre is emotional. But to say overly emotional, you're getting into evaluative language. So that's just another revision. Step back from that. And then we have consistent signal phrases. Cisneros writes. This is a third-person narrative, so it's harder. You can't necessarily say Cleophilas says unless it's dialogue because it's third person. Cleophilas thought her life would have been like that, like a telenovela. So she has we put the quote here, but then we also have some close reading. And part of that is looking at the quote, thinking through the tone, the word choice, the language, and you see that here. Young and naive, she bases not just her dreams, but, quote, her life around these shows. That's using the phrase her life from the quote, and since it came from the quote, I'm putting it in quotation marks again. It's looking back. It's distinguishing that it's not just her dreams, but actually her life, her physical life around these shows, her choices, her decisions about where she's going. And so, in this instance, her life is added in as a kind of close reading. All right, and then we repeat that again. Her life, she imagines, will be full of intrigue, true love, and passion. This is clear from the text, but it's also the writer explaining what they mean by her life. So you have a specific from the text and then another sentence that goes into more detail to explain what that was, what it looks like. The next sentence adds a new quote. So she's ready for what the telenovelas dish out, ready for the passionate version of, quote, always loving no matter what, because that's the most important thing. We now add more close reading. She interprets, quote, no matter what, lightly, imagining poetry and romance, right? So the young Cleophilas reads loving no matter what as a positive, right? This is great. Oh, this is passion. This is romance. This is love. This is poetry. This is what the young Cleophilas imagines for her life. She's prepared only for the happy ending of her life, not the reality of hardships she is to face. Again, now we have a transition to the next part of the paragraph, right? Before, after, showing change. However, as the marriage drags on, quote, the episodes got sadder and sadder. So now we add another quote. So to analyze that sadder and sadder, we aren't just going to say the tone is sad here, but instead looking back at how her view of her life is still episodic. It's still based on telenovelas, right? She reflects back on the messages of the telenovela, this time remembering the message that, quote, to suffer for love is good. She didn't remember that part when she was young. She just remembered love. Now she's like, oh yeah, to suffer for love is good? And she remembers the pain all sweet somehow in the end. So this was the message of the telenovela, but it's not the message she heard as a young child. It's the message she hears now. And perhaps she's not so sure about it anymore. The tone is dark here, unrelenting, and its focus on the need to suffer and experience pain. Notice suffer, pain. Those are words from the original quote. I'm bringing them in as close reading, as evidence of what I want to say about that quote, why I'm using it in the paragraph. As the suffering in her real life increases, The suffering of the characters in the telenovelas comes back to her. Again, trying to show that her understanding of it has changed. It's not that they changed. Same old telenovela, her understanding of it has changed. She adds, there were no commercials, and she adds is a signal phrase that gets us into the quote. There were no commercials. Even in the midst of her abuse, she still sees herself through the telenovela, measuring her life against her memories. Now she says, with no comedic relief, the hardship is more unrelenting. She's trapped. She still believes in, quote, loving no matter what, which is something from her early memories of the telenovelas. But as her real life episodes continue to get sadder, she realizes that no matter what can be full of danger. Right? This is close reading. It's saying this was her interpretation of this at the beginning. Here's what has changed, and here's her interpretation now. That's the writer's interpretation of that passage, right? The writer's interpretation is that as she watches it, her understanding changes, all right? This interpretation, by the way, this new claim is something that probably could only come out of having written that original paragraph, okay? So when the writer sat down with the original paragraph, their view was Cleophilus is naive and she thinks her life is going to be full of passion and romance like the telenovelas. Now, as the writer's writing it, they come to realize, oh, she doesn't quite think that the whole way through. I mean, she does, but she realizes at the end that it's not all passion and romance, but there's suffering and pain, and it gets complicated, all right? That's reflected much more strongly in this second paragraph, which makes it a stronger interpretation, a better claim. It's better supported. It has more close reading and analysis, so it is a more analytical paragraph. There is no summary here, right? Anything mentioned from the text is there in a targeted, specific way to support the claim that's laid out in the paragraph. Now, I get this is only one paragraph, but ideally, it would be super clear to me as a reader, just by reading the first line here, I should be able to read the writer's thesis statement and then skim through the topic sentences and see how the argument develops. Every topic sentence should be the claim for the paragraph. So I should get an overview of your whole argument just by looking at your thesis statement, ideally your title, your thesis statement, and your topic sentences. Okay, so this is what I mean by close reading. This is what I mean by depth of analysis, and it can only come through the writing process. Nobody writes this paragraph on a first draft. Nobody writes this paragraph on a second draft. And nobody writes this paragraph on a second draft with a quick edit. It really requires intense concentration, focus, critical thinking, space, all right? So you are capable of doing this. I just want to give you an example of what that looks like on the page. Feel free to take some time to read these to yourself. I am by no means saying this is a perfect paragraph. I'm saying that it is a paragraph that was a little bit too general and underdeveloped with some grammatical errors. This paragraph has also cleaned up some verb tense troubles, stuff like that. Okay, so study these two paragraphs. Hopefully you can understand why I think the second paragraph is better, stronger, and you can apply some of these lessons to your own writing. Good luck.